Long ago, a heavy shadow of fear covered the Kingdom of Olamilekan. The villages did not fear rival kingdoms or wild animals. They feared a secret, elite cult known as the Leopard Society. They were a dark brotherhood that controlled the entire region through pure, unspoken terror, promising unmatched power and immortality to those who joined their ranks. Adedeji was once a man deeply driven by ambition. Years ago, desperately wanting political power, wealth, and the respect of the elders, he made the darkest choice a man could make. He sought out the Leopard Society and begged to join their shadows. But entry into the Brotherhood was not free. To prove his total, absolute loyalty to the cult, the high priests demanded an unspeakable sacrifice. Driven by blind greed, Adedeji sacrificed his own siblings. In return, the priests welcomed him into the fold. They forced him to drink borfima, a dark, magical potion made from forbidden human parts. The heavy liquid burned his throat, but it instantly granted him unnatural, terrifying superhuman strength and the sharp senses of a wild predator. For years, Adedeji was a loyal member of the cult, feared by everyone. But a man's heart can change. He eventually fell deeply in love with a kind woman from a neighboring village. They married, and soon she became pregnant. The love for his unborn child and his wife began to wash away the darkness in his heart. Because of this new love, Adedeji made a terrible mistake. He showed mercy to a target and broke a sacred, unbreakable rule of the Leopard Society. The high priests found out about his defiance. They summoned him to the dark shrine. They declared that nobody disobeys the Brotherhood without paying a heavy price in blood. As punishment for his disobedience, the priests demanded that he bring them his pregnant wife to be sacrificed on their altar. But Adedeji had changed. His love for his family was completely stronger than his greed for power and immortality. Knowing the horrifying fate that awaited him, he flatly refused the high priest's command. Adedeji knew the Leopard Society never forgives and never forgets. Returning home that same evening, he frantically packed a small leather bag with supplies. He woke his pregnant wife, explaining the terrifying danger they were in, and hurriedly led her out the back of their hut. Under the cover of pitch-black darkness, the couple fled directly into the deep, unforgiving forest. But the cult was already hunting. The society unleashed their absolute deadliest trackers into the woods. As they ran through the thick bushes, Adedeji's enhanced senses picked up the terrifying sounds of rustling leaves high in the trees behind them. The hunters were moving entirely too fast. His pregnant wife was out of breath and stumbling over tree roots. Adedeji quickly realized that if they stayed together, they would both be slaughtered. Stopping near a massive tree, Adedeji made a heartbreaking decision. He pointed toward the north and instructed his weeping wife to keep running without looking back until she reached the distant village of Ilera, where a healer lived at the edge of the settlement. To ensure her safety, he drew his hunting dagger and sliced a deep gash into his own arm. He let his tainted, heavy blood drip heavily onto the green leaves. By taking a completely different route, he planned to act as a bleeding decoy, using his scent to draw the ruthless cult away from his family. Adedeji ran hard in the opposite direction, intentionally snapping branches and leaving a clear trail of blood. Eventually, he reached a small, dead-end clearing surrounded by high rocks. The forest went completely silent. Then, the glowing yellow eyes began to appear in the dark canopy above. The attackers dropped from the trees, surrounding him in a tight circle. The visual was pure nightmare. The men were entirely draped in heavy, spotted leopard skins, hiding their human faces in deep shadows. Fastened to their hands were massive, three-pronged steel claws, rusted and dripping with dark, poisonous herbs. Adedeji drew his heavy sword. He fought fiercely, using the supernatural strength the borfima potion had given him years ago. He swung his blade with heavy, bone-crushing force, striking down the first two attackers that lunged at him. But there were simply too many. The cult members moved with the terrifying, coordinated agility of starving beasts. The massive steel claws slashed through the air. They tore through his sword arm, completely disarming him. Adedeji fell to his knees in the dirt. As the Dark Brotherhood closed in and the heavy steel claws tore him apart, Adedeji did not scream. He kept his eyes locked on the northern trees, praying in his final moments that his sacrifice had given his wife enough time to escape the darkness. Adedeji's brutal sacrifice in the clearing was a legendary act of love, but his plan ultimately failed. The Leopard Society was far too cunning to be completely fooled by a decoy. Unknown to Adedeji, a silent spy had been watching their hut from the very beginning, tracking his pregnant wife from high up in the dark canopy while the rest of the pack chased the bleeding father. As the exhausted wife stumbled through the thick roots, she finally saw the faint glow of fires from the distant village of Ilera. She thought she had made it to safety, but just as she reached the edge of the dark woods, two massive figures draped in leopard skins dropped silently from the trees directly into her path. She did not have the strength to fight back or even scream. Moving with terrifying, merciless speed, one of the attackers swung his heavy arm. The massive, rusted steel claws violently slashed across her stomach, leaving a deep, devastating wound. The pregnant woman instantly collapsed heavily into the cold dirt. Believing the deep wound was absolutely fatal, the two dark assassins did not bother to finish her off. They wiped their steel claws and melted back into the shadows of the forest, leaving her to bleed out in the dark. The assassins were wrong. They severely underestimated the raw, unbreakable power of a mother's survival instinct. Lying in the dirt, the mother felt her life slipping away, but she could still feel the faint, stubborn movement of her unborn baby. She refused to let her child die in the wilderness. The heavy, dark poisons and magical potions coating the steel claws seeped into her open wounds, racing directly into her bloodstream. But she forced herself to stay awake. Using every last ounce of her fading energy, she dragged her bleeding body through the mud, inch by inch, slowly pulling herself out of the forest and into the clearing of the village. At the edge of Ilera, an old but incredibly strong woman who served as the village healer was outside gathering night herbs. She spotted the bloody trail and the collapsing woman. Moving quickly, the healer dragged the dying mother inside her secluded mud hut and barred the door. The delivery was a terrifying struggle of pain and heavy bleeding. As the sun began to rise, the cries of a newborn baby boy finally echoed through the small hut. The old healer quickly wrapped the infant in warm cloth and placed him gently into his mother's arms. The dying woman looked down at her son, tears streaming down her face. She held him tightly for one final moment, giving him all the love she had left, before taking her last breath and passing away peacefully. The baby boy was alive, but he was forever changed. During the brutal attack in the forest, the dark Borfima potion from the assassin's steel claws had mixed entirely into the mother's bloodstream, passing directly into the unborn child. Because of this, the infant inherited the terrifying traits of the leopard men. He was born with their unnatural superhuman strength, their blinding speed, and their heavy, predatory senses. But because he was born from an act of pure love and a mother's ultimate sacrifice, the dark magic did not corrupt his mind. He possessed the terrifying blood of the monsters, but he retained a pure human soul. The old healer buried the mother secretly behind her hut and took the heavy burden of raising the unusual child. She quickly noticed that the infant was impossibly strong, heavy, and possessed eyes that seemed to track movement in pitch-black darkness. She cared for the boy in complete secrecy for 2 years. Then, one evening, a distant family member of the healer arrived for a visit. He was a wealthy trader who lived right in the heart of the Kingdom of Olamilekan, the very same kingdom where the Leopard Society secretly operated. Sitting by the fire, the trader listened in pure shock as the old healer revealed the tragic story of the boy's birth and the dark fate of his parents. Seeing the silent, unnaturally strong 2-year-old boy sitting in the corner, the trader felt a deep sense of compassion. Knowing the old woman could not protect a child with such dangerous abilities forever, the man made a heavy decision. He volunteered to adopt the boy as his own flesh and blood. He packed the child's few belongings and took him away from the quiet village, carrying the half-blood boy directly back into the bustling, dangerous streets of Olamilekan, right under the noses of the very monsters who had ruined his life. The wealthy trader raised the boy in the bustling, crowded streets of the Olamilekan kingdom, naming him Tunde. As the years passed, it became impossible to hide the fact that Tunde was entirely different from the other children. He grew into a massive, heavily muscled young man who moved with a terrifying, silent grace. His reflexes were blindingly fast. He could lift impossible weights without sweating, and in the pitch black of the night, his eyes held a faint, unnatural amber glow. He kept his head down to avoid drawing attention, but he constantly felt a boiling, predatory instinct rushing through his veins. The truth of his bloodline remained buried until one busy evening in the city market. A crippled, elderly beggar was stumbling through the crowd and crashed heavily into Tunde's chest. Instead of backing away, the old man grabbed Tunde's arm, his eyes widening in absolute terror. The beggar possessed a strange sensitivity to dark magic and instantly recognized the heavy, metallic scent of the Borfima potion radiating from Tunde's skin. Trembling violently, the old man whispered that he was looking at the living ghost of Adedeji, the great traitor of the Leopard Society. Hearing his true father's name for the very first time, Tunde demanded to know the full story. But the truth was not handed to him easily. The old beggar was too terrified to speak further and fled into the crowd. This sparked a relentless, dark investigation. Tunde spent weeks moving silently through the dangerous underbelly of the kingdom, visiting the homes of old thieves, retired mercenaries, and forgotten elders in the dead of night. He used his heavy, intimidating presence and unnatural strength to force answers out of them, piecing together the terrifying puzzle house by house. Slowly, he uncovered the tragic reality of his father's sacrifice, the cult's betrayal, and the brutal attack that took his pregnant mother's life. Fueled by a cold, unstoppable anger, Tunde traced deep to find the overgrown, rotting mud hut at the edge of city where his parents had once lived. He tore through the collapsed walls and dug deep into the dirt floor. Hidden safely beneath a heavy stone slab, he discovered an ancient, dusty scroll. Unrolling the fragile parchment, Tunde read through all the darkest secrets of the Leopard Society. The scroll detailed their violent initiation rites, their hidden hierarchies, and exactly how their magical potions gave them power. But the scroll was not the only thing buried in the dirt. Wrapped tightly in thick layers of heavy animal hide was a massive, heavy iron broadsword. Before attempting to flee with his family all those years ago, Adedeji had secretly smuggled this specific weapon out of the cult's dark shrine. It was no ordinary blade. It was a magical weapon forged with ancient, forbidden elements designed to completely shatter the immortality of the most powerful high priests. Tunde lifted the massive weapon with one hand. He liked the heavy balance of the cold iron instantly. He felt a deep, buzzing connection to the metal, as if the sword had been waiting in the dirt specifically for him. Strapping the heavy blade tightly to his back, Tunde made a silent, unbreakable vow to hunt down and eliminate every single evil member of the society. Tunde did not wait long to begin his bloody crusade. His very first target was a feared, high-ranking cultist known simply as the Unseen Beast. This specific assassin had consumed a concentrated potion that allowed him to turn completely invisible and blend into the pitch-black shadows of the night. Tunde tracked the invisible killer to a dark, abandoned stone courtyard at the edge of the kingdom. The cultist laughed from the shadows, fully believing he had the ultimate advantage, and launched a violent, invisible strike from behind with his steel claws. But Tunde did not even need to see him, because Tunde was born with the tainted blood naturally flowing through his veins. His raw, predatory senses were far superior to any potion. He could clearly hear the assassin's heavy heartbeat and smell the dark sweat on his skin. Moving with raw, blinding speed, Tunde spun around, entirely dodging the invisible claws, and grabbed the unseen attacker by the throat. Tunde's heavy grip completely crushed the assassin's windpipe. The cultist's dark magic instantly broke, forcing his terrified, gasping face to reappear in the moonlight. Tunde drew the massive, heavy iron sword from his back and struck the assassin down in one single, devastating swing. The fight was incredibly short and completely one-sided. The cultist had merely borrowed his dark power through a sacrifice, but Tunde was born as the ultimate apex predator, making him far more powerful and terrifying than the monsters he was destined to hunt. After the death of the invisible assassin, Tunde did not stop his bloody crusade. Over the next few weeks, the Leopard Society began finding the lifeless bodies of their absolute most elite killers scattered across the dark forests and the city alleys. The high priests examined the fallen cultists and noticed a terrifying detail. The deadly wounds were not made by wild claws. They were made by a massive, heavy blade. Even worse, the magical healing of the cult members had been completely shattered by the cuts. The elders quickly realized that the ancient, stolen iron sword had returned, which meant Adedeji's bloodline had somehow survived the slaughter in the woods over 2 decades ago. Pure fear spread through the Dark Brotherhood. For the first time in their history, the apex predators of the kingdom realized they were now the prey. Desperate to stop the slaughter before the society was wiped out, the Supreme High Priest called every single remaining member to their deepest, most heavily guarded sanctuary, a massive underground cavern known as the Bone Shrine. The High Priest knew the half-blood hunter was coming. Preparing a final trap, the Dark Leader drank a massive, unholy amount of the Borfima potion. The heavy magic violently warped his body, transforming him into a towering, unstoppable beast with pitch-black eyes and oversized steel claws. He used the gathering of his assassins as bait, waiting in the dark to crush Tunde once and for all. Tunde discovered the hidden location of the cavern. Knowing he was walking alone into an entire army of monsters, he calmly prepared his body for war. He completely coated his dark skin in thick white ash to mask his human scent and blend into the pale moonlight. He strapped his father's heavy, magical iron broadsword tightly to his back. Tunde did not try to sneak into the sanctuary. He walked straight up to the cavern and violently kicked down the heavy wooden doors. Dozens of leopard men instantly charged at him, swinging their rusted steel claws. The combat that followed was incredibly heavy, fast, and brutal. Tunde used his raw, superior half-blood speed to easily dodge their attacks. He swung the heavy iron broadsword with devastating force, cutting down the cultists one by one. With every single heavy swing, the magical iron completely shattered their dark immortality, turning the feared assassins into nothing more than mortal men falling into the dirt. Tunde stepped over the fallen bodies and walked into the center of the cavern to face the Supreme High Priest. The hulking monster roared, shaking the stone pillars of the shrine, and charged with blinding speed. The fight was a brutal clash of unnatural strength. The massive high priest swung his oversized steel claws and landed a heavy, deep slash straight across Tunde's chest. But the high priest watched in pure horror as thick, hot steam rose from Tunde's skin, instantly sealing the fatal wound shut before a drop of blood could hit the floor. Taking advantage of the priest's shock, Tunde stepped entirely inside the beast's guard. With a final, explosive surge of heavy strength, Tunde drove the massive iron broadsword straight through the center of the high priest's chest. The ancient, magical metal instantly reacted with the dark potion inside the leader's veins, violently burning away the evil magic. The massive Supreme High Priest crumbled, turning into a heavy pile of lifeless gray ash on the cavern floor. With the Leopard Society completely wiped out, Tunde walked slowly out of the dark cavern just as the morning sun began to rise over the horizon. While the dark magic of the cult would normally make a man fear the light, Tunde's pure human soul allowed him to stand perfectly safe in the warm, bright daylight. Looking down at the peaceful villages from the mountain, Tunde felt a heavy weight lift from his shoulders. He finally understood his true purpose. He was not a cursed monster, and he was not an outcast. By using the very strength of the beasts to destroy them, he had completely freed the powerless people from the unspoken terror inflicted by those evil men. He did not return to his normal life because he knew his mission was far from over. Tunde packed his heavy sword and began a lifelong journey. He spent the rest of his days walking from one kingdom to another across the vast continent. He became a legendary, wandering protector, a heavy, silent daywalker who dedicated his entire immortal life to hunting down every single evil group that dared to prey on the weak in the dark. Today, when people hear the name Blade, they picture a modern movie superhero. They think of a man in a black leather trench coat and dark sunglasses, driving fast cars and shooting silver bullets into vampires at underground techno clubs. They picture a slick, comic book vampire hunter. But the true legend of the Daywalker was not born in a modern city. Long before Hollywood created the stylish vampire hunter, the ancient African myth told a far heavier, more grounded story. He didn't need silver bullets or sunglasses to fight the darkness. He walked into the deep woods coated in white ash, carrying the heavy burden of his mother's sacrifice in his veins, and wielding a massive, magical iron sword forged to shatter immortality. He fought real monsters, men who consumed human flesh for power and terrorized the innocent. So, the next time you see Blade on the screen, stepping into the daylight to hunt the undead, ask yourself, is he just a marvel of modern fiction, or is he a forgotten echo of Tunde, the ancient, half-blood protector who walked through the sun to deliver brutal justice to the monsters hiding in the dark?